And again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Internal Affairs Oversight Panel public meeting. My name is Anthony Fugate, and I am chair of the Internal Affairs Oversight Panel. Now, the meeting is open for the public to attend in person and is being recorded through Zoom. Zoom has been set up for video recording purposes only and is not an option for public participation at this time. If any members of the public reviewing this recording need a transcript to follow along, please reach out to the OPAT staff. Now, public comments will not be held during this meeting. You're welcome to submit any comments that you have to the OPAT board at opatboards@boston.gov. Again, opatboards@boston.gov. And then we will be acknowledged at the next OPAT Commission meeting. Now, as an introduction, I need to take roll call. I am the chairperson, Anthony Fugate, president. Christina Miller.
Present.
Aaron Hackshaw. Jamaica Hobbs.
Present.
Clark Tran, not present, but we have a quorum. This morning, we will run through the agenda, and you can see on the screen, each board member has a copy of the agenda in their binder. Our first order of business is to approve the meeting minutes from the OPAC June 17, 2025 meeting. A draft of these meetings is available to the public on the OPAC website, and each board member has a copy of the minutes in their binder. Are there any corrections to the minutes as presented?
I have none. No.
Sound?
I would move to adopt.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll ask for the votes by name. Okay. Christina Miller,
Aye.
Jamaica Hobbs,
Aye.
and I as Anthony Fugate. We'll move on to the executive director's report, which Executive Director Vandro Cavajo will read into the record. Would you please, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. And welcome to the members of the Internal Affairs Oversight Panel to our third meeting of the year. I'm super excited that we have not had to cancel any meetings. Things are going as planned. Certainly for members of the public that may be viewing this, I'm Vandro Cavajo, and I've had the honor of serving as the Executive Director of Office of Police Accountability and Transparency, also known as OPAC, for the past year and a half. I'd like to provide the board a quick update in terms of some of the things that OPAC has been up to since, as an agency, has been up to since our last meeting, which was in June 17th of this year. At this point, I'd like to give a thank you to my team. We see a couple of them with us today. And we are running on a skeleton team of 7 people. But I have some good news in that regard in terms of hopefully some onboarding of new team members in the near future. That includes investigators. As I think I mentioned last meeting, we have been down to 1 investigator for the past few months. I'm proud to say that we have 2 investigators on queue that should be starting before the end of the month. So next time we come to this meeting, before the end of the year, you will have 2 members. I don't know when this, we narrow down, we have picked candidates. I won't say their names until they start with us. I'm super excited to have them coming on board to help us with our capacity. The other position that is going to be on board very soon as well is a community engagement coordinator. That I will say, the person is Corey Jordan. He's got a starting date on October 20th. We're super excited to see him, to welcome him. And of course, again, the next meeting, you'll get a chance to meet him as well. Finally, we are in the final stages as well of onboarding, of perhaps getting a director of finance and administration starting again, hopefully by the end of this month. So to kind of put it, to summarize it, we've been working hard in many positions to fill the gaps in the vacancies that we've had. And particularly, I want to give a shout out to Esther Lene, So our deputy, who's sort of been leading a lot of that effort, on behalf of the agency, as well as Cheyenne, who does it all, as well in that space. Though we're kind of short, as I said, in terms of capacity, we continue to do community engagement. We continue to help hold all our meetings. In fact, the CRB, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but the Civilian Review Board met as well recently on September 11th, which we had some interesting outcomes out of that meeting. We'll discuss that later. I continue to do every 2 weeks. We continue to do a coffee hour. We call it Executive Director Coffee Hour. We've done it. We've done several of them. I think I've been saying this on an ongoing basis. And in fact, this Friday coming up, we will be in JP. For those that are at JP, please pass by and say hi. And just so kind of for the record, Mario, what's the coffee shop we're going to again?
Ola Cafe.
Ola Cafe, which is
ULA.
ULA. Thank you so much. So our coffee hours is usually from 10 to 11. Again, we've been doing them throughout the neighborhoods. Hyde Park, we've been to West Roxbury, we've been to the South End, we've been to certainly Dorchester and Roxbury, Mattapan. So we continue to do those going forward. We also continue to have the open door days on Wednesdays, first Wednesday of the month here at OPAC. Most recently over the summer, we had one that focused particularly with youth and had over 10 young people in the office to learn and dialogue about OPAC and how to be engaged with us. So that's building capacity and sort of just the overall operation of the office. But now I'd like to switch to talking a bit about the Civilian Review Board, which, as you all know, is the other board that we have here, that is short for CRB. They met, as I mentioned, September 11th. And previous to that, in fact, in case I didn't mention before, they had voted to create a subcommittee on policy. And that subcommittee has met several times and made some recommendations to the wide board, which essentially culminated into a letter to Commissioner Cox that came out of this last meeting, essentially expressing some concerns around non-cooperation of police officers with OPAC investigations, and perhaps also commissioners, BPD commissioners' non-responsiveness or delayed responses to the CRB recommendations, findings and recommendations. And finally, the OPAC Commission, which, as you all know, again, for members of the public, the OPAC has three boards, if you will. One is meeting now, that we call it the IAOP. The second one is CRB, which I just articulated, met in September. And finally, the chairs of each of those boards, along with myself as the executive director of OPAC, we become the OPAC Commission. The OPAC Commission, too, has been meeting regularly. We had a second meeting August 13th at the Bowling Building. We discussed in that space, again, some of the responses and the things that are going on around the Civilian Review Board. In fact, there was an article in the news that board members should have in their packets in terms of some of the dynamics in that space. And we'll get to talk a little bit more in depth on this later when we discuss our policy and processes as to why that relates to this board in particularly. So I'll stop there, but I did want to mention two more things that I thought were very significant in terms of what the OPAC Commission was able to accomplish during that meeting. First and foremost, we were able to finally, take steps forward in terms of executing our subpoena powers that we've had since the agency started. And particularly the commission voted to delegate the authority to on routine matters of investigation for the executive director to use the subpoena power in lieu of the 2/3 votes requirement every time. So they essentially voted that I can go forward, the team and I can go forward with routine matters of investigation, particularly those that the CRB does on a day-to-day basis, to move those forward without having to vote every time. Number two, we also voted on a 45 days timeline for the BPD commissioner to send responses to the CRB for in terms of his decision around disciplinary actions towards officers, particularly around sustained cases, determination. Again, more to come on that, and I think, I think part of what I want to do is hold back into saying too much details on this, because I think we need to finalize some things in the next, commission meeting, which I believe is at the end of this month on the 28th, correct, Cheyenne?
Yes.
So on the 28th of this month, in October, the commission will meet again, we'll sort of revisit some of these issues and make final the language. And obviously, when we make that final determination, the final language, you all will have, the next meeting that the IAOP has, this board has, I'll be sure to have a copy of that in your binder. And we'll have a more, perhaps just, a more in-depth discussion on that. The last thing I want to get into before I close my remarks here, Mr. Chairman, is something that you're all aware of, because I shared with all of you, the OPAT's fiscal year 2025 annual report. I believe I shared it with all of you a couple weeks ago. It's been ready for some weeks. And I'm proud to say that, I think, hopefully you got a chance to look at it. Amazing work from the team. We have, I think one of the things that I said to the mayor recently, in fact, which is one of the notes I have here, I had a meeting with the mayor on Friday, is that, I'm proud to say that we've rebuilt OPAC, right? This is the first time that we've had a full board with both chairs. We haven't skipped any meetings. We continue to advance the work of OPAC. So even though, again, we have a smaller team, we continue to execute to a high rate of capacity. And based on that meeting that I had with the mayor this past Friday, in fact, our team this morning confirmed with me, and this is actually a pleasant surprise to the team here at OPAC, because we kind of been holding to figure out when we're sending this out. And they confirmed with me this morning that we will have the press conference on this Thursday to release the report at noon. And obviously, once we confirm the details in terms of time, noon, actually, it will be at noon, but location perhaps we'll share with all of you, and if you're around and have the space to come. I think it's going to be in City Hall. It's something that you're welcome to attend as well, okay? So again, just to kind of reiterate this final note, the annual report of OPAC that we're required by ordinance to do every annual. It's been ready, we shared it with you all, but now is the time to share with the public, and the mayor and I agreed that we'll do a press conference this Thursday at noon to location to be determined to release our report. And again, I'm very proud of the work that's in there, particularly around some of the things I've already explained, but also about the vision that we have, hopefully to execute into this fiscal year 26, which we already are well into, and ahead of. Particularly, again, I think one of the key things was around a subpoena, because everybody keeps asking, when are we going to do it? When are we going to do it? So the first step is taken. Esther and I and others have been talking about, how do we get formalized the letter, the legal, obviously it's a legal process to make sure that we do everything by the book to execute those. And my plan at the latest is to execute this by the first of the year. It should be less than that, but again, I want to make sure, particularly coming out with this thing, that the subpoena, that we do a thorough process, and all of you, particularly the chair, will be involved in terms of that, what that looks like, and what, thinking through details. And I see you, Christina, nodding your head. We'll certainly tag you as well, because I know you know the space better than most as a former prosecutor of many years, and currently a professor, perhaps, of some of these processes. Okay, so that's all. I went a little more than I always wanted to, but it's my opportunity as the ED to, one, say thank you to the team, and to kind of just give, not beyond all of you in the board, but to give the public, in a sense, on the record in terms of the work that we're doing and what we expect to accomplish going forward. So I'll wrap it up there. Happy to answer any questions as usual, Mr. Chairman. But if not, happy to move on as well. We have a lot of work to do today on the agenda. I'm very excited about some of the things that we're going to engage on, particularly around some discussions around processes and policy that are sort of in the air around your board, this particular. Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Executive Director Carvajal. Does anyone have any questions of the executive director at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to other business. We'll take some time to discuss some important process and policies to help the IHOP better fulfill its roles. At this point, I'm going to ask, does anyone have any additional outstanding questions to ask before we consider going into executive session?
Mr. Chairman, just to kind of
Yes,
pause
sir.
there, we do not need to discuss this portion in the policy discussion can be taken and should be in front of the public, and then
Certainly.
when we later kind of skip steps a little, when we go into the cases, we can go into executive session. So
Understood.
right now, I think it's best to keep it public session. That make sense?
It does.
Okay, so we'll just, I think that perhaps your role is not expressed in that space, but we just, I think the next thing is just to go into the next part of the agenda, which is again, this policy discussion, and with that space of, obviously we'll continue to be talking, because I've drafted I got a little 5-6 slide for you all to kind of walk through this space.
All right. Please.
So, and again, you will see the agenda over there. Mario, what about please? So we have 5 points here that I want to cover. These are not meant to be exhaustive in terms of the things that are gaps that I see in terms of executing IOP's mandate. But these are some of the things that I thought perhaps we should start with. And the plan is not necessarily to land, and have clear steps in terms of where we do or don't do going forward. But perhaps again, my plan, the general plan is to have all of these, if not most of them, clear by the first of the year, so that we have, some clear mandate in terms of how to execute some of these spaces. Okay. The first thing again is the CRB letter to the Commissioner Cox, which already began to sort of talk about. Number 2 is besides the CRB, the commission also needs to send responses to IAOP decisions, particularly those that says we disagree or do more and things like that. And that in practice has not been happening. Okay. So I wanted to, because of what happened with the CRB, I wanted to bring that up because that's something that we need to think about going forward. Number 3 is the process of automatic appeals, right? The ordinance, we'll talk about further in the slide, but the ordinance again talks about automatic appeals, what ID she must send to us automatically. And then number 4, again, perhaps even more important, is the random appeals from ID, which is a process that loosely exists in the past. Right now is largely quiet. We haven't done much of it, but I want to think about again what that looks like for us going forward, right? And finally, it's this process of direct appeals, which, as you all know, the main way that we get cases, at least from the public, is through direct appeals. Those are the cases that you've been reviewing. I also noticed that, on the CRB side, the Civil Review Board side, we have an intake form for that, but we don't have in IOP space. It's largely been, people email them, people calling and just saying, I want to appeal, right? So thinking about what that process should be. For the future, I think it's something that helps the agency have more formalized ways of operations. Okay. So again, those are the 5 topics I want to sort of carry on this next few months. But again, there's more. There's always more. So next slide, please. So let's start with the CRB letter. Okay. As again, you all have the letter in your binder. Essentially what happened is that on June 30th, obviously the CRB, I should rewind, the CRB has been meeting regularly, as I said. They have made decisions on a regular basis, and there were like at least 10 or more cases over the past several months, perhaps a year, that the commissioner had not responded to, right, which is again required by law, right? But on June 30th, he sent a letter, 4 letters back around some of the cases. Essentially, the letter were more or less boilerplate. And I know, Mr. Chairman, we discussed some of this in OPAC commission meeting. And essentially the letter said that the commissioner would be sending these cases, these reports to IID for further review. And beyond that, to assess whether the findings and recommended disciplinary actions he's gonna follow those, okay? And again, as you see in both there, the department, whether the department concurs, or thinks they need additional investigations, okay? So furthermore, on August 12th, the PD also sent us a letter, a report, letter response back from the commission again around this case 18, which again, we don't necessarily need to go into details, but you can certainly, this is the case that generated some news coverage over the summer around, what BPD did, the commissioner did, particularly, the theme was that obviously the commission, the CRB were making recommendations, and essentially the commissioner were not following, right? Ultimately, that's sort of the theme of the article. And whether OPAC, is sort of has the bandwidth to do the job, because ultimately the decision is of the commission, and the commission essentially has not been sort of doing the recommendations as was suggested by the CRB. Good morning. So that culminated with essentially, as I said, one, the CRB had already voted for a subcommittee to take a look at several issues, and this sort of issue kind of piled into that. And they, on September 11th meeting, discussed and essentially vote on a letter to Commissioner Cox, which you all have in your packet, right? Expressing concerns, obviously, around non-cooperation of the officers, which is an issue that we faced in the past, that I hope, at least through subpoena, we can rectify some of that. And then also around his recommendations and what to do with those, okay? And one of the things, I don't want to, again, take too much time with this, but I wanted you to be aware, because that's the other arm of the agency. And then we'll lead into how that impacts you as well, okay?
Sure.
One of the things that becomes critical around case 18 is that, and which the letter specifies, that the commission is really not allowed, per our ordinance at least, to go and say, this case that you sustained, we did further investigation, we are now unsustaining, right? The commission's prerogative and powers are in the execution of the disciplinary action, right? So essentially, whatever the CRB determines, particularly around sustained case, those decisions are final, which I think that's something that the commission perhaps did not understand, and the letter does, which is also, to kind of close out this space, is also something that we discussed as a commission in the August meeting, and we also took an issue with that, right? So again, hopefully when we come back as a commission, we can now pick up where the CRB left to take it further, okay? Which again, even the 45 days of saying you need to reply within 45 days is a space that sort of perhaps gives less time to send it to IID, wait for months, do further investigation, and so on, and then get a reply back. And again, I don't want to focus too much on this space. It's more about your awareness, because it's such a loaded issue. It's a lot to unpack of what's going on here, but happy to sort of engage in this space briefly, and then we can go into the next, perhaps again, more important space of how I think this applies to you all as well. Okay. Any questions? Obviously this is a discussion, so I shouldn't rush through it all. So consuming, feel free to ask any questions, and whenever you're ready, we can go to.
Questions about the CRB. I think my memory is lacking. I think in the past 2 years, we had one case in particular that I'm thinking of where we needed more information to make a decision.
Correct.
And I don't think there was cooperation to get that information.
Correct.
For our purposes as a board.
Correct.
So where do you see that interface of, we need more information for our decision, we're not getting it.
So I think, this again ties into the next, you're going to the next chapter, next slide. It's two things, right? It's actually during a meeting with the commissioner, this came up as well, is recently is one, obviously you have 3 outcomes, right? You have agreed, right? That you said we send it out and that's the end of it. We have the disagreed, right? and the commissioner has asked that that when you do disagree, that you put on record, so that we send the letter back. These are the reasons, so that they have some clarity around that, because some of the reports on that have not been clear, for their guidance purpose. And finally, I think, what you're alluding to, Ms. Miller, is around do more, right, further inquiry. And I think, as you alluded to, I think at least one or two, or perhaps more cases have occurred in the past where we did not get the feedback. And I think, again, this is where the space here perhaps is a letter from this board or some infrastructure that says, this is what needs to happen, right? I think largely, and I've given, the BPD commissioner and his team the benefit of the doubt, is that they don't necessarily know that they need to reply and when and by when. I'll give you one example. For instance, we had a case, this is before I started, where actually this happens to be here, and it's for, I can say on the record because you all know who he is, and there's a case that's already settled, was involving Carlton Williams, one of the lawyers at CPCS years ago, had a case where he came here, actually it was an appeal, right, through IID, came here, and essentially we said do more, right? The board said do more, but between, obviously again, whether it was a gap in our space or process, BPD did end up doing more. But when I talked to him, the reason why I know about this is because he actually said this on the window, on the media, is that I came to a pat appeal, I didn't hear anything back, right? So they did do more. It still stayed the same, but there was never, it wasn't until I asked about the letter months later that, or the response that, they were like, oh, actually we did do more. Here's another report, right? Which we were able to send to them, right? So I think part of that, perhaps like the what we agreed upon, the OPAC commission agreed upon the 45 days, right? So it's setting up the parameters about, when we expect, and whether it's a disagreement or do more, when we expect those things to return back, then having a system in place for us to follow through with, right, to after, because again, this particular case highlights how they actually did do it. But because again, we weren't following up, we didn't expect that. That's just, it never came back, right? So even for disagreement, perhaps if we can land on sort of, and again, I'm not saying we'll do it right away now, but perhaps for next time is to sort of just say, okay, here's some things that we want to be clear with the commission about, just like the CRB was, right, as a board, and we're happy to draft that letter, right, if you will, so that then you vote on it, then we send it out, right? And I think part of it, again, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, is that they're not clear, like even the on the CRB side, to be able to say, no, I'm going to decide whether this is sustained or unsustained. I'm not sure they're looking at the ordinance like we are, right? Which is why ultimately those regulations that we're starting to work on becomes more clear indication for BPD, for members of the public, for everybody. This is how we interpret it, right? The ordinance, right? And I think that's sort of the gap that we have. So that's not clear until we, those of us on this side said, okay, let's look at why is this? How do we force this? And the sooner, I know we just started working on some of the regulations, but the sooner we have that in the print, including some of the stuff, right? Not only on the CRB responses, but we should include the IAOP response, right? And when and how long they should take, right? So, but great question. So hopefully that sort of gets to what I'm thinking about this. And then again, if it's 45 days, then we'll, as an agency, we can follow up, right? Then it's sort of not in the wind. I know at least since we, the last few meetings, we've had at least one or two disagreements, right? That we can follow up even now to say, okay, has anything happened with this? What else can we do? And the other thing, and I didn't intend to bring this up now, but I figured I will. There's language in that ordinance as well, which I found surprising. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention to the section that says essentially that perhaps we, OPAC, can do a little more. I always thought that it was like hands-off review, but there's some language in the ordinance, and then perhaps again, I don't want to flush in that space, but perhaps next time we can take a look at that language. And if it's just another, obviously, then you have to decide what should go to BPD and what OPAC can do. We shouldn't come in and do a whole investigation, but if it's another witness or two, perhaps investigators can. I'm saying that with a caveat because obviously we only have one right now, we're tapped, but as we build, and there's other spaces that we can get to go to, and there's language that suggests that OPAC could do some preliminary things to check things out, for some of those cases. So it doesn't always have to go back to BPD. And once I bring that up, that language, maybe you can disagree with me, maybe I'm right. But those are some spaces again that perhaps we'll discuss in the future.
I think that'd be a great discussion, Emma.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful.
I literally just saw this a few days ago.
No, we had, there was some. We did have some discussion under the previous leadership around people who would come to our meetings and whether we could hear them or not, in what forum we could hear them, officers and complainants alike.
Right.
We never, I don't think we ever really settled on whether
Okay.
that was possible. The ordinance, as you said, is not entirely clear about whether we can, if that person does want to speak with us, and in what form.
Okay.
So I would appreciate follow-up in that area.
Yes, we'll follow up on that. I think it's a great point. I mean, typically, you know, in appeals, in boards, you know, there's at minimum,
Record
you
is
come in,
limited.
it's, yeah.
Right.
But, you know, but the lawyer can come in and, you know, and argue their point, right? So there might be some space there to do that too, because we've had who come in on those cases and I think Esther said this better than most is our process designed for people to be heard. Right, and that's like the fundamental, you know, design as to why we exist, right? So I think that's something, and I'm looking at my career, that, you know, the next meeting, perhaps we can grab, and one or two of these things is flush out more, settle on something, and move on to the next, agenda item. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that explanation. Does anyone else have any comments or questions of the executive director? No?
Let's go to the, and now can we'll be, next slide, please. There's a couple more things. I'm sorry, go back to the other one. All right, so here, and I'll get up here, okay? And we already kind of touched upon this space, but this is what I was talking about. One, right now, the practice, at least since I started, is that there's no written notices from the commissioner around OPAC disagreements with the ID. Okay, no letters of response. Number two, our ordinance, pursuant to our ordinance, this is straight from the ordinance, if you will, too. You know, in terms around agreements, that he doesn't have to do anything. So if the panel agrees, we just send it. Okay? This portion here is the important portion, which is if the panel disagrees with the internal affairs findings, the appeal. Right, so the appeal is technically not dead yet, is what I read that. Right, so typically we process the case, you know, when it comes before the board, no matter what it is, the case is essentially done. Right, but here to me, it says that the appeal, right, remains active, is referred to the police commissioner. And the commissioner here, the last language, this is what I was talking about. He mentioned if you can send them some thoughts about why you disagree with stuff, right? But here, perhaps more importantly, is that the commissioner, if he determines that the case was investigated fairly and thoroughly, the police commissioner will notify the panel, which is you all, his legal advisor and the named officers, right? So here is what's not happened. This notice to us. When you know, we send him a disagreement, then he says it was investigated thoroughly and fairly, right? But again, that process is not taking place right now. Okay. And so here, the other thing that I want to highlight, and we'll talk more about this in a couple slides down, is this process of here. I think we're starting to pick up on this, is that your review is whether it was fairly done or thoroughly done, right? So this is key in terms of like the standard, what you're looking at as a review of the IAD, okay? So we'll talk about this in the space of one of the last slides. I talk about the fact that we don't now have a intake form from complainants. The process of our complainants file appeal with us, it's kind of loose a bit in a sense that, you know, they'll send an email, they'll call the office, but perhaps do we do the complainants need to say that, you know, it was fair, it wasn't done fairly, or it wasn't done thoroughly, or is it something that we just kind of look at through our lens and they just kind of just submit something, right? This is something to think about again, in terms of that space. Okay, next slide, please. And, you know, once I'm done, I guess I'll just go through the slides. Once I'm done, we can talk about any part of the slide. So this is the other portion again that I said, we think about is that, currently, there's no current, we're not receiving automatic appeals, okay, from them. And this is required again by statute, that the following categories of cases, these, theft, obviously use of force, perjury, obviously in custody death, that they, once they are done with it, the ID is done with it, that they have 14 days to send them to us, right? Like, I think, again, this is largely the ID and the PD Commission not knowing, because this is an area, not sure, Christina, you've been, Ms. Miller, you've been on this since the beginning. Has this ever happened? Right, so this is largely a part of the ordinance that's not been executed. So the question is, do we want to go in that space and how? Right, I'm not suggesting that we don't do, but I'm just kind of start teasing out some of these areas of the ordinance that we're not focusing on. The main thing that we've been doing is direct appeals, right? And in the past, we've done some random appeals, right? Which is the next one, please. Again, here, currently, no formal process, request random appeals, but pursuant to our ordinance, in fact, you know, yeah. The IAOP, this is something you should be aware of, if you see something in the news or you just want to look at something, the IAOP, at your discretion, you may request review any case or groups of cases. Right, so you're technically, anything that, that's reviewed, in fact, I'll say this because I mentioned this to the commission. One of the cases that made me take a close look at this, it's still sort of percolating and going through BPD's process, is the case where we saw, this has been in the news for a couple of years now, where five teenagers, they were teenagers in the car, it was a chase, huh?
318.
Three ended up dying.
It's the case number's 318.
Okay, well, there it is. Right, so with kids, where essentially there were a bunch of kids in the car. This was playing out in the news something. And I remember this started before I even started here. They were, you know, essentially they were chasing some kids perhaps in a stolen car. And some of the details don't peg me to it. But essentially what I'm saying is that that case has been going through ID process. In fact, one of the officers recently either was fired or left. This has all been playing out in the news. When that's done, you could technically say, can we review that case? Particularly a case like that required a lot of attention, right? So this is, again, just a brief facts, if I remember correctly. It was on Morrissey Boulevard. And there was a chase with some kids in the car. And one of the sergeants said, don't chase the kids. Somehow the police end up still chasing the kid or not chasing the kids. And the kids got into an accident. And a few of them died. Right. So it's been, in the news for over the past couple of years. So slowly going through the ID process. In fact, at one point, the court was asking for more documents and all these different things for BPD to release. They never did. But I'm just giving you that one example. We're designed for spaces like that to say, okay, let me make sure. Let us look at it, right? Because it's our job, right? So in addition to, again, to the fact that you have a blanket mandate here, this is where the random sample comes in of cases to be referred, and whatever percentage of closed cases it shall designate, and it's his discretion from time to time, right? So I think, and again, I wanted to just kind of put this in your space, start thinking about it, maybe come up with some questions and ideas, and then we kind of flesh out each one, right? Each topic about how you want to do this. Right, what is random? Like I know in the past, and Diana can talk about some of this, you know, they will just go there and there'll be a boxes and they say, here's your random, take them, right? But we need a more operationalized, formal way of saying how we're gonna do that, right? And we know that their cases are all numbered. Perhaps we could say, you know, for the past year, you know, maybe we'll get 10 or 15, but give us every 100 cases, every case that ends with 10, every case that ends with 5. Right now you have a random way. Right, so it's not, again, nothing against them, you know, giving them the benefit of the doubt, but showing up with the box and saying, take a look at these boxes, it's not random, at least from my point of view, right? Because we didn't dictate what the randomness is. Okay, so for next time, perhaps again, we can come up with more concise ways of sort of teasing out what this process could look like. But I wanted to kind of flesh it because I've mentioned it many times in the past, and we just keep being stagnant a little bit. Okay, as a final thing, next slide, please. The direct appeal process, which I talked about earlier, a bit is that, obviously, again, 14 days, they can, the commissioner is required to, which they normally do, is required to send them a notice, and that if the case is not sustained, is honorary or unfounded, the complainant will be informed of their ability to file an appeal of the final adopt. That's largely how we're getting them. Because once they make a determination, they send a letter to the person, and the person comes to us, typically again via the phone or email on the website, and file an appeal. This 14 days, it's also been unclear in terms of what the 14 days is and when does it start? Does it start when they send a letter? Does it start when sometimes they've sent emails to them as well? When does it start? We usually, as a team, I think in the past have been sort of flexible in that space because it's not clear when the 14 days kick, which honestly I think I've expressed this in the past. 14 days is a bit short for the people that we're dealing with. 30 days it would be ideal at minimum, right? So, but it does present. But we are, I mean, it is functioning in the sense that we are getting people appealing on a regular basis. And then again, as I asked here, is the appeal based solely on fairness and thoroughness, or are we looking at larger stuff? Okay, so I'll pause here. Happy to so just kind of go back to the initial one, the first slide, please, where you can kind of just see all the 5 things that I brought up here. And you all, I can give it to you as well. We can talk about it now. But if you have thoughts about this stuff and want to take a look at the ordinance and come up with, some ideas, we're happy to take them too. Okay, if you want some time and want to draft something, this particular part of the ordinance that you want to think about, we're happy to take your lead on this. So we talk about the letter to the commissioner and your letters to the commissioner, his response or lack thereof. We also talk about the process of automatic appeals from ID, random appeals, and then directed. Those are this stuff right here is your big buckets in terms of the work that you put on. Okay?
Sure.
All right, any questions? Any thoughts?
Yeah,
And I was
random appeal is huge.
Huh?
The random appeals is huge.
It's huge, yeah, I think it's huge too.
In a particular example that you gave, is that an ongoing matter to this day even?
I think so. Because again, literally, I've talked to them behind the scenes a bit about it, but it's playing out in the news every so often. I think as soon as like a couple months ago, one of the officers was fired or something like that, right? I forget. And a few months ago, the DA, before it was with the DA, the DA determined not to prosecute the officers. This was also playing in the news. So this case though will be more on automatic appeals. It should be because people died. But again, if we're not watching it,
That's just watching it.
yeah, and perhaps we don't do the automatic appeals, but we focus more on the random appeals, and we then can cherry pick, like this case or other cases that you may see in the news, because the office is designed to do that. If you see something in the news, reach out to us. Hey, listen, watch for this, or can we do something about it? Which some of you are already doing. But the more stable we are, the more thorough we are, the better we can, and the more process we have in place, the better we can execute these things going forward. Absolutely.
As it concerns the direct appeal form or process, and I'm sure you're already doing or have a perspective based on what I've said. But I just want to be sure, we want to make sure that as accessible as possible.
Absolutely.
So if it is an email, if it is a phone call, is it the investigator that can speak with the person who wants the appeal and then help them fill out a form or question them? Or is that, is that the
Intake.
investigator roles?
It usually starts with intake. Every
Okay.
case that comes in, comes either through phone call, through
Okay.
walk in or through website.
Okay.
But the first touch is the intake, person who will call the person and get more information. And largely it happens in the CRB cases, but it could be an email as well. And I know that only because the ordinance, again, and I should have pinned down that language, it says written. Even, again, it's not designed to sort of be a hindrance, as you're saying, right? But having that, I think, even having that written thing, that's not necessarily drafted or report drafted by the investigators that you typically see, that will help you to see what the
Yes,
person
absolutely.
is thinking about happening, right? So, which, I mean, granted, they already gave a statement typically, as you know, to the, but just to kind of, I think it just gives you one more piece of information for you to understand what the person's thinking now, right?
Agreed.
They could even say, oh, they didn't even talk to so-and-so. They, it's been 10 years, right?
Right.
Which they do, right? And largely you're getting that from a perspective of the reporter. But I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have an intake that's capturing that information, that initial call from on the appeal side, is usually, so that intake form could be very helpful. It doesn't have to
Very.
be.
Absolutely.
So, and again, obviously, we have something that already on our website. I don't know if people go on the website now and they want to appeal, how do they do it? They go,
They go online and they just do it, it's a regular CRB, but they have the option of doing an appeal.
okay,
Or CRB, case.
okay. So you're saying the form does have an appeal request?
Yeah.
A checkbox, but it would be nice to have a separate one specifically for appeals, so people aren't confused.
Right, I mean, I think I just want to have that, right? And I'm not sure that's something that that you all see either, maybe I'm wrong, but in terms of that intake form, right? Again, and we typically talk to them, right? So which goes back to what you were saying earlier around just access to the person being able to speak and being heard, right? Because when we get the appeals, we're still talking to them, right? Even though we don't do a thorough investigations from there, but the information from the person is still helpful to have. And if they say the police didn't talk like Carlton Williams, his thing was that the police didn't talk to his brother. He's got a twin brother, in case you didn't know.
We do.
We do, okay. The police didn't, I mean, he's a lawyer, I mean, he's a Cornell now teaching, so he gave me the full, they do this, they do that. And so caption that in the beginning is very helpful to have.
Absolutely.
And honestly, even if we came here and told you some of that stuff, would be, which is what you were alluding to, would be helpful to do as well.
And then on top of it, we have the mailing and the email, so if it is mailed, they need to have the return receipt attached to it as to the date of it. Because that's one of the, that 14-day kind of thing.
Right.
I've had issues, whether it's an officer who was filed the complaint or somebody else, and they just got an email, but then they're saying that, there might be some issues with regard to the mail.
Yeah, and that's been, that 14 days has been debatable in terms of,
Yeah, it might be quick.
it is. And we've had incidents, unfortunately, too, where the case was, it was in February, when
Yeah.
that letter never went out, right? Like, so some of that stuff, obviously some DPD issues to work out, but we've had people call and, the case was decided, months ago, and I didn't get a letter, right? I didn't get a letter. I get like, well,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so that's, so some of those details are stuff to think about. Good.
Well, just substantively, I appreciate the fact that you are explaining all the appeal process procedures. But substantively, how, with the, with the direct appeal process, have you ever, your administration or this one, have overturned a finding based from the criminal affair, and what happened after that?
So our team, that's in us, the OPAT administration, we don't, all the cases that come direct appeals, they always have to go before you. So we don't get to determine whether to throw it out or throw it out. Any decision that's made, which is again, the outcomes are limited to the auditors, which is we agree to with them, right, which you've been voting on. Or disagree or do more. So those are the options. So we, the OPAC team, or the executive directors team, if you will, does not sort of determine ahead of time whether this case gets before you or not. So every case, direct appeal, gets in front of you. We do have preliminary, I'm glad you asked that question, I'll flag it for you as well. One of the things that's come up, and a couple of the cases that we're gonna deal with later on, and I want to discuss the details of the cases, we're on public session, but the ordinance requires that there is a final determination by BPD, and then for you to see if you agree or disagree with that. Thank you, Esther. What we've had though, and I think we've seen that in the past, may continue to see, this case that BPD, a couple of those cases again around this, just to kind of flag it for when we get into the discussion. Those cases do not have a final determination. So it's kind of like a probable cause determination, if you will, in court. Some cases, particularly, if you have a frequent flyer, people have 2 or 3 cases together of the same facts or same people, the BPD may not even put it through the whole process. They determine that at the very preliminary stages, and I forget the exact language that they use, general inquiry. Thank you, Esther. Esther the best. General inquiries, right? So they do general inquiries. And so there's no determination that this is unsustained. They just say this is not going through, right? So in those situations, you do not have a final determination of sustained or unsustained or anything like that, right? So that's right. So we've had this case, these cases for a bit now. We didn't know what to do. It's like, let's put it in front of you, and then you can determine, okay, do you want to take those cases too? Do you want, but if you agree, what are you agreeing with? Sure. Are you agreeing, this is one again, let's go back and do more, because if you disagree with them, this is not just a disagree, this is a further inquiry, right? And is this a space that will pass you do it because they already determined it's not sufficient, right? To even meet the muster, as we call, right? So this is a very interesting space, right? For us to tackle because it's new. Because there's no final determination. So when you disagree, what do you disagree? What do you agree with? Are you agreeing that this was not sufficient for them to even deem it appropriate to put it through the channels in a full investigation? So a few of those cases again that we have today, and that space for you to tease out some of this, and wherever you land, we're happy to execute. But this could be again a space perhaps that I'm not suggesting that's the way to do, but perhaps opaque it further, right? Because again, they determine that that's not enough, right? And what does that mean for us effectively if we go the other way? Right? But the case has been here in the limbo because we were like, there's no finding, and we couldn't send it to CRB, right? Perhaps we could, but we didn't. So it's going to be in front of you momentarily to have further discussion on that. But
Are there a lot of cases where that has happened?
no, it's not a lot. It's not a lot. It's not a lot.
And have they been sent back to the commissioner's office to,
No. So here's the thing. So I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if the record reflects that. 2, I'm not sure they're telling them when they send them a letter that this did not meet the muster, this general inquiry. One, I didn't even sending them a letter. Right? Number 2 is the letter saying they can appeal to us, right? I'm not 100% sure, but we're not seeing a lot. I will say that because again, most of them will go through. You'd hope, but you also got to think about their processes, like ours, like the courts. The stuff that is just like, man, we can't wait. We can't waste a lot of resources on this because we have all these other things, and we know that this woman was here last time and the time before, and so that's that going on here. So we have to be aware of that, right, in terms of use of resources. But we're not seeing a lot of those. If most of them, in fact, this is probably the only 3 that we have occurring. And I think in the past, they have sort of just put it through CRB, but that's also confusing. But wherever we land, I'm happy to try to execute. Because the ordinance can't capture everything, right? They just can't, right? But great question, long-winded answers,
No, I
always, but
appreciate that.
I just look for ways to sort of,
I do appreciate that.
I wanted, but we never, to kind of be short and succinct, we do not, if it's a direct appeal, we do not say it comes before the board. We do not, like on the CRP, we have more leeway to sort of dismiss or whatnot, but here, if it's an appeal, it has to go before the board.
One more question.
Sure.
With, within our ability to pick random cases, or a batch of cases, for review. Have you have you thought about, what type of cases that we should do? My suggestion is that if there is a series of cases that is somehow on the borderline of racial profiling, I like to see them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, yes, I mean, interesting thought there, go ahead, Mr. Chief.
Yeah, you saw the question
Yeah, yeah.
percolating in my head. With respect to the random, and I'm just following up on what he's saying. There are a number of different ways we can do it. Certainly what was in the media, certainly as you indicated. But what about individuals, officers that are there, a number of different complaints about? We know we have one here, we've got an individual complaint who's been back, complaining several times. But what about officers specifically that have a number of complaints?
So let's just think it through a little bit. So random, there. Well, as I said in the slide, you can review anything you want. Like literally, that's what it says, right? You have the discretion to say, send me cases of involving such and such an officer. If you see some cases there, you're like, oh, this is the second time. This officer come here, this doesn't sound right. You could ask for that, right? So, but I think of random as we literally are doing a random check. But you could do like by number, you could even kind of group it in terms of what Mr. Walker said, in terms of like cases involved in this sort of situations, right? Then it's sort of, and the BPD, they may or may not have a system to track those cases, right? So we have to dig that out. But I think of random, more random. But where you just kind of saying, every 10 cases, every 100 cases, then you're just kind of going random, right? But you can also do, on the flip side, that's more targeted, right?
So I
So,
was thinking more like any officers where there have been 10 complaints in the last 5 years. Or do you think that's just being a little bit too specific?
it's not being specific, but I, in my mind, that's not random.
Okay,
That's targeted.
okay.
It's targeted, you know what I mean? Like, so the random to me is a policy that you can tweak, but it's just random, right? But that's just my thoughts. But target, you could target, again, you could target it based on racial profiling or discrimination, complaints. You could say, give us all of the cases that involve racial profiling or discrimination the past year, 6 months, or 20 of those cases, but pick it by this category, right? But the random to me is, but you can kind of mix, like literally, as the mandate says, you can look at everything. I mean, obviously, we don't have the bandwidth to look at everything, which is why now we have the random ways, we have the automatics, and then perhaps again, in this space, you can think about target. Like what, like this incident, for instance, involving officers with chasing, all right, involving another one that comes up often in every space really is the gang units, right? The specialized units, right? Involving the teenagers, right? Like what, so that space is open and go ahead.
If I could suggest though,
Mhm.
that I think that would go under the automatic appeal, if the automatic appeal process was followed, right? So the groups of cases in the automatic referral include excessive use of force, unlawful arrest or stop,
Yep.
allegations that they violated regarding the respectful treatment of people, including the bias-free policing policy, and or was motivated by discriminatory intent. So it could be that if we end up, if we all end up following the automatic appeal,
Right,
those cases, I hope should be.
correct. That's true. That's true. That's true. The automatic appeal is
And it does include that any other case deemed appropriate for review.
right. But I think in that vein though, is that targeted. It just lifts, it makes it that much more important, right? You want those. Don't send us when now you're kind of taking.
We're targeting behavior.
Correct, yeah, that's what yeah, exactly, targeted behavior, so you're looking, that's just signals that's an important thing for the board. So we're not gonna wait for automatic when it trickle in. In fact, even if you already sent it, like, here's the, you know, the universe, as we say, the universe of cases we think is very important to look at. That, I think, to be honest, it's perhaps more impactful than the automatic ones. Sure. That, but, thank you. This is the language I was talking about, no, I was looking for, the language that's.
I have the ordinance up right now, what are you looking for?
The language that's just that, here it is, I found it, thank you. So I call your attention to. So I felt good saying, I haven't said that in a long time. So last time I said that was in front of a judge, so I call your attention to, so 12, 16, 13, which is powers and duties of internal affairs and oversight panel. 13, so 12-16.13, okay? You see it? So the G,
Yes,
this is the language I was talking about earlier, Ms. Miller, around to make recommendation for further investigation or clarification to OPAS staff. Or to Chief of Boston, right, or to IAB, right? You see that? That's very, like, that's a very, like, that jumps at, right? So that gives us some leeway in terms of saying, okay, let's have OPAT dig further on this angle or that angle, right? So that it's not always sending back, right? I think, again, that's how I read it. And that was, every time I read this ordinance, there's always something that I learn new. And I've read it like a million times perhaps, but that's, what do you make of that language?
I agree with just what you said. That's how I see it at this point.
Yeah, so you can kind of use that language to say, okay, and so that alleviates some of the space of waiting for them to do more. In responses, no responses, you can kind of say, okay, was this person talked to? And I think we talked about, well, it does come up in the sense that a lot of times it's sort of like, oh, did you get the video? I think it's come up, right? Oh, did you get whatever report? We didn't get, what happened to this one video, right? So that's that, right? So we didn't get all the videos. So that's that, right? So we kind of been doing it, but I think that just is like, what else can we do with that language? So, okay. So we'll, again, next time, perhaps it sounds like the random and automatic, like which one out of the 5 do we want, like the number 2, I think, the response to IAOP, I think we should, the commissioner could take it on and kind of include it, not just CRB, but IAOP responses as well. Remember when we voted on that?
Right, yes.
I think that may make sense there, right? So that kind of, settles that portion. But amongst the other stuff, the last 3, what you all think it's sort of, we can do them all? We're gonna do them all? We gotta figure out, like, what's the next step, for Michael, as he looks at it. In terms of, so we have something solid, based on the discussion we had today, for next time to perhaps solidify, okay, here's what random's gonna look like going forward, right? Or here's, automatic appeals is what we want, right? Or even again, the intake form. Perhaps we can do them all, but I also try to take bites, one at a time.
Yeah, that may make sense.
I mean, the automatic seems to be more in the hands of the commissioner to effectuate, right?
Right.
The ordinance is clear what should be automatic.
Exactly.
So I feel like
So then,
we need a response from them about
Definitely a meeting in a month.
that's actually happened.
Exactly.
okay, so then,
The randoms, I think we have more control over
okay,
about how we want to do randoms.
so effectively, then how do we communicate that though? Do we want us to draft a letter saying, going forward, bids automatic appeals, I know common practices, we haven't gotten them, but going forward, can you do these? Was like, is that?
Yes.
I mean,
It's not- I'm just,
it should be,
yeah.
yes,
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
I think that's right.
so, all right, so what we'll do, is we'll draft it, okay, and to avoid coming back. We'll just have, if you could vote on empowering the chair to just review it. Because the minute we review, everybody's reviewing and sending, then it gets us into,
Open meeting.
open meeting laws situations. So if you can empower the chair to sort of finalize the letter, and then obviously we'll send it and have it before you next week, which is sometime before the end of the year. I think it's in December.
December 1st.
Okay.
I would so move.
All right, second,
Okay.
All right,
all in favor?
I,
all right, so.
Roll call.
That's the,
Yeah,
there you go.
she's right.
So we have one to do.
Ms. Christina Miller,
I,
Jamaica Hobbs,
Aye.
Clark Tron,
Aye.
and Anthony Fugate, aye.
So we'll have that done, come back with the copy. And then we'll walk through some of the other stuff next time,
Okay.
okay? All
Makes
right,
sense.
thank you so much.
Oh, one minor question.
Yes.
My last question. In the past, because this is the kind of issue that I dealt with when I was in city Cambridge. When I understand that we have the subpoena power, but when a police officer refuses to our process is to appear either at a hearing or a
Mhm.
response. I hate to see that we have to go to court to enforce the subpoena. And usually what do we do here?
We don't, long story short, but because, I think you missed some of that in the beginning, but
I'm sorry.
we just, the commission.
Mhm.
So it's kind of overall, the commission, the subpoena power exists within the commission, right? The
Right.
chair of each board along with myself. We voted last time we met, as a commission that that essentially delegated the power to me. So that it doesn't require 2/3 of the vote every time you want to subpoena an officer.
Right.
So the reason I said long story short, no, is because we haven't walked that path yet.
Oh,
But which is one of the things we get all the time is that we haven't used our subpoena powers since we existed. So, but it may come to that, unfortunately, that officers are, that we have go to Superior Court and duke it out for informal language, right? Because but unfortunately, we've been in this space of not using it.
Okay.
But we also, one of the before you got here, we talked about it briefly. One of the things that should be in your binder is a letter from the CRB, particularly the other board, ask and recommend that the commissioner, at least suggests or recommends to the officers to participate. So that's one of the things that they put in their letter that, so obviously we can still subpoena. But just having the commissioner saying, you all should participate,
Right.
would be a win. I haven't, obviously we haven't gotten the reply letter yet. I didn't say anything. Okay, so, but we will walk that bridge, okay, and see where we land in terms of, do we go to court? And to be honest, as I said earlier, I love court. I'm not going to court because I won't be going to court, but I'd rather get in that space
Sure.
than us just looking like we're just not doing it, right? Hopefully we won't get there, but we're walking that path, and if they say they're not gonna come, we will have to fight, and then we may or may not win. But we gotta fight. There's a fight that we may have to take on. Because, does that make sense?
Yes, and unfortunately, it may end up in court for the reality of the situation is, what is the collective bargaining agreement say with respect to this? And the only one's gonna be able to trump that is the Superior Court, so it may end up going in that direction, but again. we're
And
just
that's,
now getting our footing on this.
So we're finding all angles, if you will. We are, we are going to try to get OPAT language in, I'm not sure if, about the agreement better than me, whether that happens or not officially, because anytime you get more, you gotta give more, right? So, but that is also another strategy amongst, like, you're trying to get cooperation. So it's asking the commissioner to ask them to participate. It's the subpoena that we have, and then one of the third option, which we will pursue also is to look for when we're discussing the the agreements to get language in there about OPAC and the corporation of OPAC. So that will sort of maybe handle some of that space. Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully. Okay,
Any other comments, folks?
any other comments?
Questions? All right.
Thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate that we were having these in-depth discussions. And from here, I'll let Esther and Diana and the rest of the investigative team to handle the next phase of the cases. So I think this is when we go into the
Executive
executive session.
Yes.
motion.
I would move to, adjourn into a executive session.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we need a-
Second.
We need an actual vote on that, Esther, right?
Correct.
You need a roll call on that?
Yes.
Ms. Christina Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Shamika Hobbs, Mr. Clark Now Khan,
Yeah.
and I, Anthony Fugate, yes. We're in executive session.